In the underground world of high-stakes corporate espionage, trust is a fatal flaw. The men who control global energy grids, defense contracts, and private banking networks do not operate on honor. They operate on leverage. For 15 years, I was the ultimate leverage. I am Damian Vance, former commander of an elite Delta Force unit and current CEO of Ironclad International, the most lethal private military syndicate in North America. I did not care about political ideologies or morality. I built a $3 billion empire by executing surgical extractions, securing black-budget servers, and eliminating targets that high-society billionaires wanted buried. I lived in a world of absolute cold discipline, surrounded by bulletproof glass, armored convoys, and automated security grids. Until a Russian oligarch named Viktor Volkov offered me $30 million to recover a stolen master drive. And I crossed paths with her. Her name was Clara Sterling. Volkov lied to me. He claimed Clara was a rogue hacker who had stolen his private financial archives to sell to competing cartels. He wanted me to breach her high-security penthouse in downtown Chicago, retrieve the drive, and leave no witnesses behind. But when I blew open the reinforced steel doors of her private residence at 2:45 in the morning, I discovered that Clara Sterling was not a petty thief. She was a weapon. Clara was a 27-year-old brilliant cryptographer working undercover for the Department of Justice. She had spent 18 months quietly penetrating Volkov's private network, uncovering a shadow enterprise that traded in illegal weapons, human trafficking, and corporate assassination. She had just finished downloading the master encryption keys when my team breached her perimeter. When I stepped into her office, my 6'4" tactical frame dominating the doorway, my custom-suppressed 45 raised, I expected her to drop to her knees and plead for her life. Instead, I found a queen who looked at my tactical strike team as if we were nothing more than a minor annoyance in her calculations. Clara was standing behind a heavy glass desk, illuminated by the stark blue glow of 3 server monitors. She was breathtaking in a way that hit my chest like a physical blow, shattering every ounce of my professional detachment. She possessed a rich, lush, magnificent figure that defied the artificial standards of high society women. She wore a midnight blue satin evening dress that draped flawlessly over the sweeping curves of her full hips and accentuated her soft, voluptuous waist. Her dark hair fell in thick, luxurious waves over her shoulders, framing a face of intense, aristocratic intelligence. She didn't flinch. She slowly unplugged a sleek titanium drive from her console, slid it into her handbag, and met my gaze with dark hazel eyes that burned with pure, unyielding defiance. "You're right on time, Commander Vance." Her velvet voice drifted through the silent room, rich, smooth, and entirely unbothered by the tactical rifles aimed at her chest. Volkov's mercenaries usually take 20 minutes to bypass a biometric lock. You did it in 6. I suppose $30 million buys quality labor. I stood frozen, my finger resting on the trigger of my weapon, my mind calculating the variables, but my blood burning with a sudden, dark, and terrifying heat. I lowered my pistol 3 inches, stepping into the room, my combat boots crushing the shattered glass near the doorway. "You know my name, Miss Sterling?" I growled, my deep voice rumbling through the silent penthouse like distant thunder. "I know everything about you, Damian," she replied calmly, taking a slow, confident step toward me, her midnight blue satin dress rustling softly against her lush thighs. "I know you served 12 years in Special Forces before building Ironclad. I know you pride yourself on never failing a contract. And I know that Viktor Volkov didn't tell you what's on this drive." She stopped just inches away from me, her soft, warm body radiating an intoxicating scent of wild roses and rain. She looked up into my cold eyes, refusing to yield an inch of space despite the lethal force surrounding her. This drive contains the names of every corrupt official on Volkov's payroll, including 2 federal judges and the director of the agency that hired you," Clara whispered, her hazel eyes locking onto mine with fierce intensity. "Volkov didn't hire you to recover his data, Damian. He hired you because he knew you'd kill me. And then he plans to detonate a thermite charge in your sub on the way back to hide the evidence." I stared down at her, my cold, analytical mind analyzing her heart rate, her eye movements, the absolute lack of tremor in her hands. She wasn't lying. She was laying out a tactical truth with the brilliance of a master strategist. In that fraction of a second, 16 years of mercenary logic evaporated into ash. My objective changed instantly. I didn't care about Volkov's $30 million. I didn't care about the contract. My brain registered a single, primal command. Protect her. Claim her. Burn Volkov to the ground. I reached out, my large, calloused hand wrapping firmly around her soft waist, pulling her full, breathtaking curves flush against my rigid frame. She gasped softly, her breath catching in her throat, but her hands came up to rest against my tactical vest, feeling the heavy, rapid thrumming of my heart. "Pack your drive, Clara," I whispered, my voice dropping to a low, possessive frequency that shook the quiet room. "You aren't dying tonight, and Viktor Volkov is about to find out what happens when he sends me to hunt my own queen." By 3:15 a.m., the Chicago skyline was shrouded in a heavy, freezing rainstorm. My armored convoy of 3 black suburban subs was navigating the empty, rain-slicked span of the Wabash Avenue Bridge. Clara sat beside me in the reinforced leather cabin of my lead vehicle. She had wrapped herself in my heavy wool trench coat, the black fabric draping over her midnight blue dress, yet doing nothing to disguise the magnificent, lush curves of her body leaning against my side. She held her titanium drive tightly in her lap, her dark hazel eyes watching the rain streak down the bulletproof glass. "Your team is quiet, Damian," Clara murmured softly, her velvet voice breaking the heavy silence of the cabin. "Are they always this disciplined?" "They are loyal to me, Clara, not the money," I replied, my gaze fixed on the road ahead, my hand resting casually on my holstered .45. "When I tell them the contract is cancelled, they don't ask questions. They prepare for war." Before she could answer, my front driver slammed on the brakes. The heavy SUV skidded across the slick asphalt, coming to a halt 20 feet from a roadblock of 3 heavy commercial trucks blocking the bridge exit. Instantly, the headlights of 4 black sedans lit up behind us, trapping our convoy in a fatal bottleneck. Volkov hadn't waited for us to deliver the drive. He had sent a hit squad of 20 Russian mercenaries to execute us all on the bridge. "Hold your position!" I barked through my comms to my team. "Protect the lead vehicle! Fire at will!" The storm was shattered by the deafening roar of automatic weapons. Fire! Heavy rounds slammed against the armor-plated doors of my SUV, the bulletproof glass spiderwebbing under the concussive force, but holding firm. Clara didn't scream. She didn't panic. She crouched low in the footwell, her dark eyes looking up at me with fierce, unwavering trust. "They brought heavy-caliber rifles! Damian, the glass won't hold forever!" I reached into the weapons rack between the seats, pulling out a custom compact assault rifle and extra magazines. I turned to her, my large hand coming around the back of her soft neck, pulling her up until her face was inches from mine. "Stay in this cabin, Clara," I growled, my deep voice thick with absolute, terrifying authority. "The doors are rated for high explosive impact. No one gets inside this vehicle while I am breathing." She reached up, her soft fingers gripping my tactical vest, her hazel eyes burning with a sudden, intense heat. "Don't just survive, Damian," she whispered, her velvet voice laced with pure venom. "Kill them. Show Volkov what happens when he tries to take what's yours." A dark, dangerous smile touched my lips. I pressed my thumb against her soft lower lip, feeling her breath hitch, then slammed the heavy armored door open and stepped straight into the war zone. The Wabash Avenue Bridge was transformed into a battleground of steel, rain, and blood. The howling wind swept off Lake Michigan, whipping the heavy rain into blinding sheets. But inside my mind, there was only absolute, mechanical clarity. Volkov's mercenaries thought they were ambushing a standard corporate security detail. They didn't realize they were fighting the founder of Ironclad International on open ground. A man who had spent 15 years perfecting the art of urban warfare and lethal counter-tactics. I stepped out into the freezing rain, my broad shoulders blocking the line of sight to the armored SUV where Clara was sheltered. My assault rifle barked through the storm. Thud, thud, thud. 3 Russian mercenaries advancing behind the lead commercial truck were dead before their boots hit the slick asphalt. Hollow point rounds shattered their tactical vests, dropping them into the standing water. My tactical team, trained by the finest special forces units in the world, flanked from the secondary vehicles, laying down a devastating grid of suppressing fire that completely pinned the remaining ambushers against the bridge barriers. I moved forward with relentless, terrifying momentum. I didn't seek cover. I moved through the crossfire like an unstoppable force of nature, driven by an apocalyptic rage that demanded total annihilation for anyone who had dared to threaten my queen. A massive Russian enforcer, wielding a heavy automatic shotgun, stepped out from behind a stalled sedan, aiming directly at my chest. Before he could pull the trigger, I closed the distance in a fraction of a second. I grabbed the hot barrel of his shotgun, forcing it skyward as it discharged violently into the clouds, drove my knee into his ribs with bone-crushing power, and rammed my combat blade straight through his neck. He collapsed onto the hood of the car, gasping, blood pooling beneath his tactical gear. I didn't pause to watch him die. I racked the slide of my sidearm, clearing 2 more mercenaries who tried to break through our flank toward Clara's door. In less than 3 minutes, the gunfire died down, replaced only by the roar of the wind, the heavy patter of rain, and the groans of dying men. The 20-man hit squad had been completely erased. I walked back to the lead SUV, my combat boots splashing through the crimson-stained water on the bridge deck. I opened the heavy, armored door, stepping into the warm, dry interior. Clara was sitting in the footwell, her dark hazel eyes wide, holding a tactical knife she had found in the glove compartment. When she saw me standing in the doorway, covered in rain, cordite, and the blood of her enemies, she didn't scream. She didn't look horrified. She looked at me with an intense, intoxicating mixture of awe, relief, and absolute devotion. I reached down, my large, bare hand taking the knife gently from her fingers, setting it aside before wrapping my arm around her soft waist and lifting her lush, breathtaking body effortlessly back onto the leather seat. "The bridge is clear, Clara," I growled, my deep voice rough and vibrating with adrenaline. "Volkov's hit squad is dead. You are safe." Clara reached up, her soft, delicate fingers framing my scarred jaw, completely unbothered by the rain and mud dripping from my face. She pressed her warm body flush against my chest, her hazel eyes locking onto mine with fierce intensity. "I knew you wouldn't let them touch me, Damian," she whispered, her velvet voice trembling with pure emotion. "Now, take me to your sanctuary." Let's finish what we started. My primary sanctuary was a brutalist-style subterranean fortress hidden beneath a 50-acre private estate in the hills of Wisconsin. Reinforced with concrete blast doors, satellite jammer arrays, and an autonomous security perimeter, it was a ghost facility that existed on no public map. It was 5:30 a.m. The rain had cleared, leaving a cold, misty twilight hanging over the dense pine forests outside the floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass of the master suite. Inside the command room, the hum of high-powered servers filled the quiet air. Clara sat at my primary master terminal, wrapped in a plush black silk robe I had provided for her. The dark fabric draped over her shoulders, opening slightly at the front to reveal the magnificent, lush curves of her chest and hips, her dark waves of hair falling wildly around her regal face. Her titanium drive was plugged directly into my syndicate's encrypted satellite uplink array. I stood behind her, wearing a black thermal shirt and tactical trousers, a custom Kimber 45 holstered at my hip. My large hands rested on the back of her leather chair, my body looming over her like a dark sentinel, shielding her from the rest of the world. I have penetrated Volkov's primary financial server in Geneva, Damian, Clara murmured, her velvet voice ringing with absolute, chilling triumph. Using the master encryption keys from this drive, I've unlocked his off-book accounts. $42 billion in illegal assets, shell companies, and arms manufacturing pipelines. She stopped typing, leaning back against my chest, looking up into my cold eyes with a dark, breathtaking smile. Viktor Volkov thought he could buy the world with his blood money. But money in a digital world is just code, and I am the master of his code. I reached down, my large, calloused hand coming to rest on her soft, voluptuous waist, my thumb tracing the rich curve of her hip through the thin silk. "What is your decree, my sweet genius?" I growled softly into her ear, my deep voice rumbling through her entire frame. "I'm executing a complete wiping protocol," Clara whispered, her dark hazel eyes burning with righteous vengeance. "I am transferring $20 billion of his assets to the victims of his human trafficking networks across Eastern Europe. The remaining $22 billion is being frozen by federal authorities in Zurich as we speak, and I just broadcast his master contact list to the CIA, the FBI, and Interpol." She hit the central enter key with absolute, ruthless finality. On the secondary monitors, line after line of green financial data turned blood red before flickering into permanent void. In a single keystroke, Viktor Volkov's $42 billion empire was reduced to ash. He was no longer an untouchable oligarch. He was a destitute, hunted criminal with 1,000 enemies closing in on his location. "He is ruined, Damian," Clara breathed, a single tear of pure, overwhelming victory escaping her eye. "He has nothing left." Before I could answer, my second-in-command, Marcus, entered the command room, holding an encrypted tablet. He looked at Clara with profound respect, then turned to me. "Boss," Marcus reported, his voice tight, "Volkov just realized his accounts are wiped. He's currently at his private airfield near Milwaukee, trying to board a charter jet to flee to a non-extradition country. He has 6 remaining bodyguards with him." I looked down at Clara. Her hazel eyes met mine, burning with a silent, absolute demand. She didn't want Volkov to face a comfortable prison sentence. She wanted the monster who had tormented her to pay the ultimate price. "Ready the chopper, Marcus," I commanded coldly, my eyes never leaving Clara's face. "I am going to personally collect Viktor Volkov's final debt." The private airfield near Milwaukee was shrouded in a heavy morning fog. Viktor Volkov's private Gulfstream jet sat on the tarmac, its engines idling, ready for immediate takeoff. Volkov, a gaunt, arrogant man in a $10,000 cashmere coat, was sprinting up the boarding stairs, holding a briefcase containing his remaining passports, surrounded by 6 heavily armed Russian mercenaries. He was screaming at his pilot to close the doors, his face pale with sweating, hysterical panic. He never made it inside the cabin. My Black Hawk helicopter dropped out of the foggy sky, hovering 30 feet above the tarmac. I didn't wait for the chopper to land. I unbuckled my harness and dropped straight down onto the wet concrete with a deafening, concussive impact. Volkov's mercenaries turned, raising their automatic rifles in panic. It was not a battle. It was an execution. I moved through their line like an apocalyptic judgment. My dual Kimber pistols barked through the foggy morning air. Thud, thud, thud. 6 rapid shots, 6 center-mass impacts. In less than 12 seconds, Volkov's entire security detail lay dead on the rain-slicked asphalt. Volkov dropped his briefcase, stumbling backward down the metallic stairs, falling hard onto his back on the wet tarmac. He looked up at my massive 6'4" tactical frame looming over him, his eyes bulging with sheer, agonizing terror. "Damian! Please!" Volkov choked out, crawling backward, his hands slick with water and dirt. "He'll pay you anything! I have offshore vaults that aren't on the drive. 50 million cash. Just let me board the plane." I stopped directly over him, my heavy combat boot stepping firmly on his chest, pinning him to the cold concrete with crushing weight. I looked down at him with eyes that held no mercy, no humanity. Only the cold, dead absolute of an executioner. "You offered me $30 million to put a bullet in Clara Sterling's head, Volkov," I growled, my deep voice rumbling like an earthquake beneath his ribs. "You thought her life had a price. You thought a woman of her brilliance, her beauty, her magnificent soul could be erased by a cowardly parasite like you. She's just an agent," Volkov shrieked, coughing up blood under the pressure of my boot. "She is my queen," I corrected him, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "And you just committed the fatal error of hunting what belongs to me." I didn't waste another word. I raised my pistol and pulled the trigger. The single shot echoed across the empty airfield, ending Viktor Volkov's reign forever. 2 hours later, I returned to the subterranean fortress. The heavy blast doors sealed shut behind me, locking out the violent world forever. I walked into the master suite, discarding my tactical vest and weapons, my heart pounding with a deep, possessive hunger that had nothing to do with war. Clara was standing near the floor-to-ceiling glass window, watching the sunrise break through the mist over the pine forest. She had taken off her silk robe, wearing a soft, form-fitting cashmere sweater that draped over every rich, breathtaking curve of her full hips and voluptuous waist. When she heard my footsteps, she turned around. She saw my clean face, my calm eyes, and she knew that the nightmare that had haunted her for 18 months was finally over. She didn't hesitate. She ran across the room, throwing her soft arms around my neck, her lush, magnificent body colliding with my unyielding frame with breathtaking force. I caught her effortlessly, my large hands wrapping firmly around her soft waist, lifting her off her feet, pulling her flush against my chest. She buried her face in my neck, inhaling the sharp scent of rain, cedar, and my skin, her body trembling with pure relief and unbridled passion. "It's over, Damian," she whispered, her velvet voice thick with emotion against my skin. "Volkov is gone. The network is destroyed. I'm finally free." I pulled back slightly, my large hands framing her soft, regal face, my thumbs gently tracing her cheekbones. "You were always free, my sweet genius," I murmured, my deep voice thick with an all-consuming, possessive heat. "You just needed a protector who was lethal enough to clear your path." Clara looked up into my dark eyes, her hazel gaze burning with a fierce, eternal devotion that scorched my soul. "And what happens to the mercenary who burned his $30 million contract for an undercover agent?" she asked softly, her full hips pressing deliberately into mine. "Are you going back to your private military syndicate?" I let out a low, dark growl, tightening my grip on her lush waist, backing her against the soft leather sofa until she was completely trapped within my embrace. "My syndicate operates right here now, Clara," I whispered fiercely against her lips, my gaze dropping to her mouth before locking onto her soul. "You are never leaving this sanctuary, Miss Sterling. You can run global security grids from this terminal. You can change the world with your mind. But your body, your heart, and your life belong to me. Clara gasped softly, a shiver of intense ecstasy running through her body. She didn't push me away. She leaned up, tangling her soft fingers in my dark hair, her lips capturing mine in a deep, scorching kiss that sealed our destiny forever. "I'm not running, Damian," she whispered against my mouth. "I've finally found my home, in the arms of the most dangerous man alive. True power in this world isn't measured by the millions in your bank account or the armies you command for pay. It is measured by finding a woman whose mind outshines the darkness, and having the sheer, unyielding strength to slaughter anyone who dares to threaten her light. When a lethal mercenary falls for an untouchable queen, he doesn't just complete the contract. He kneels at her feet and turns the rest of the world to ash."